Well, welcome everybody. This is another session of Tie-Dye Dialogues with your host, Lou Silverman. I am an attorney and I practice in the estate planning, probate, and trust area. And this is a part of my leadership series where I'm taking the opportunity to interview people with proven leadership skills and success. And I like to get under to peel the onion, as they say. And my guest today is Paul Mittman, also known as Dr. Paul Mittman. He is the president of Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. Good morning, Paul. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello. Thanks for the invitation and to all future guests. Apparently the invitation comes with an actual tie-dye shirt courtesy of Lou Silverman.
I'm also known as the tie-dye lawyer, but that's not how I make a living. That much I can promise you. I'm lucky enough to have known Paul by serving on two boards, one with Tempe Community Action Agency and serving on Paul's board at Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. So Paul, before we get started, I know that we're going to try to kind of start peeling away at some of the onion. And the first one I'm going to do is I want to share a screen with you and I want you to tell us about this. So are you seeing that on your screen?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So tell us, where are you?
I am between Silverton, Colorado and Telluride.
Wow.
Or maybe between Telluride and Durango.
Okay.
This is on a ride. It was a fundraiser for ALS research. And it was a 3-day ride. And it was quite hilly. And the two things that I remember from the ride was, number one, was that it was very hilly and it was very windy. And so I remember going up that pass. It was about a 3-hour climb to get up to the top of the pass, and then going down. It was so windy that I actually had to pedal on the descent, which is really a bummer because after all of that work, you just look forward to relaxing on the way down. So that's me on my old trek. And what happened was since this is about leadership, in 2009, I did a Piper Fellowship through the Virginia Piper Charitable Trust. And my Piper Fellowship was two things. So part of it was to learn more about fundraising, which is an important part of being a college president. And the second was that you had to do something that was kind of like a sabbatical. And so these bike trips was part of the sabbatical that was kind of rolled into the fellowship. And so for the fundraising part, this Indiana University has the Lilly School of Philanthropy. I did 5 courses in Indianapolis at Indiana University. And I happen to know the executive vice president for development, which is fundraising, at the Livestrong Foundation. And that was back when Livestrong was, a bigger and kind of very well respected organization. And so I got to sit in with him every month for about 6 months and observe how this person runs the fundraising at Livestrong. And this happened to be a person who had raised over $1 billion at Emory University. So it was a really creative, but really a great learning opportunity. And since I was going to do this bicycle riding, and Livestrong, of course, Lance Armstrong, was sponsored by Trek, so I had a Trek bicycle. I did a bunch of Livestrong rides. And so this was an outgrowth of that. So this was the bicycle riding part of that fellowship. And I would have to say that to this day, I still ride thousands of miles every year, for at least the last 10 years.
What is a typical bike ride for you lengthwise? What do you just hop on your bike at home and say, okay, today I'm going to do 50?
Yeah, it depends. And I tell people this a lot, that riding a bike, unlike running, it's like if you run a marathon, it's 26 miles, it's exhausting, kind of beat your joints up. Other than, the amount of time that your butt can endure on a bicycle seat, riding a bike is like, I can go all day long. So one of my favorite things to do is if I have a weekend day and I don't have to do anything around the house or have other responsibilities, is just to ride all day. So on a weekday, before work, it's usually 25 to 35 miles. And a weekend is between 50 and, maybe 80
Wow,
miles.
amazing.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, people go, wow, that's really a lot. But it's, you know what it's like? It's like that expression, hey, it's like riding a bike.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to do.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be the equivalent of me saying shooting layups on a basketball court is the equivalent of playing in an NBA game. But so I do see a little bit of a difference. But
Yeah. Okay.
so, everybody would ask you, and so I have to do this, to take 2 or 3 minutes and just explain to us what is naturopathic medicine and why should I care about it?
Okay. So naturopathic medicine combines the best of conventional medicine with prevention and alternative therapies. So it's science-based, so you have to do a regular history, physical exam. You have to understand what's going on, what's the diagnosis, um, lab work, whatever imaging, and you need to get to the root of the problem. So you have the diagnosis on the one hand, but then the treatment is really tailored to the person, and it could be drugs. So if I have pneumonia, I'm going to take an antibiotic. Uh, on the other hand, if I get pneumonia or bronchitis every year or every couple of years, there must be something else going on. So looking underneath that, whether it's diet or some environmental factors. And then the therapies combine either conventional like pharmacology or referring people for surgery or chemotherapy or whatever is appropriate, and using acupuncture, nutrition, herbal medicines, etc. And I would say in this environment that we're in right now, so much of what we do to prevent COVID, in the pandemic, to prevent COVID-19 infections is really very naturopathic. So number one, practice prevention. Number two, um, stay as healthy as you can. We just did so people who don't have underlying respiratory problems are more susceptible to more severe illnesses. We did a study in conjunction with Arizona State University here at SCNM, where we looked at vitamin D status. And so vitamin D status, people who are either deficient or even just low levels of adequate but barely adequate vitamin D had COVID-19 infections that lasted a third longer than people who had adequate levels. So it could be getting out and being in the sun if you are fortunate, like we are, to live in Arizona. On the other hand, because the other responsible thing is to wear sunblock, most Arizonans do not have adequate levels of vitamin D. So from a naturopathic standpoint, it would be, judicious supplementation of things like vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C, and maybe some other bioflavonoids that could help uh, fortify the person to prevent, to strengthen their immune response and prevent either infection, but also to decrease the severity of the infection.
What is a bioflavonoid?
So bioflavonoids are, that you're supposed to eat fruits and vegetables, especially, colored things like berries and tomatoes or things like that. And the pigments that are in those are bioflavonoids. So blueberries are anthocyanidins. So the blue, like cyan, you're probably the master of colors these days. So blueberries have anthocyanidins. Tomatoes have lycopene in them. So all of these colored compounds are called bioflavonoids, and they're antioxidants. And so they help protect our cells from damage from either chemicals in the environment or from UV radiation, for example. And it's really interesting because like if you think about it, like, you know, these plants don't have these compounds just for our benefit, you know? So like, why would a plant need to have antioxidants, you know, within itself? Why do medicines come from plants? You know, why are, you know, the first antibiotic was from a plant. The first chemotherapy drug was from a plant. Aspirin came from a plant. Like, why would plants be such a rich source of medicines? And it's because plants have oxidative stress because of photosynthesis. All of that heat, it's kind of like a car engine running, causes damage to the plant. And so through evolution, they develop these bioflavonoids, these antioxidants that protect the plant. And they also happen to be good for us. Plants can get viruses just like people can. And so they have to create these compounds to protect themselves because they can't go to the doctor, or they can't pick up and move, go somewhere else that has like fewer mosquitoes or something like that. And so they develop these compounds that protect the plant. And it turns out that not in all cases, but in many cases, these same compounds can turn into medicines for people. So from a naturopathic standpoint, that's a real focus of the research that we're doing here at SCNM, is to really understand how is it, why is it, and what are the different ways that humans can benefit from medicinal plants. And out of about 500,000 species of plants on this planet, we've only explored 5,000 species, so only 1%. And today, according to the WHO, a full 11% of the most essential medicines come from plants.
Wow.
And so clearly there's a rich reservoir for us to pursue. And then finally, to answer, this wasn't an elevator speech unless we were like in a super skyscraper. But the other thing about naturopathic medicine is that it doesn't operate in a vacuum. You know, it's not to say that you shouldn't go to a medical doctor. You shouldn't go to the emergency room if you get hit by a car, if you have a heart attack. It also means that when a vaccine comes out, I will tell you that I will get a vaccine, you know, assuming that it's as safe and effective as it appears. And that's what we will advocate for our employees and our students at Southwest College of Naturopathic Medicine. So it's not either or. It's like, how do you combine the best of both to offer a patient, you know, the best individualized healthcare?
So just as a quick follow-up, for somebody watching this, and including myself, if I have something going on, let's say that I've just got extreme gastritis, my stomach has just been killing me, maybe I've been throwing up. Do I go to my MD or do I go to a naturopathic physician, and why would I choose one over the other? When I said MD, I meant,
Yeah,
doctor.
your conventional doctor. Yeah, I mean, I think if you are in an emergent situation, you know, you're throwing up, if you're at risk of dehydration, if you're throwing up blood, if you're, you're about to pass out, I would go to the emergency room. And chances are your doctor, your medical doctor is going to say, you know, don't come here, go to the emergency room. On the other hand, most people, let's say with gastritis or reflux, you know, gastritis, severe heartburn, most people have that chronically. And so most patients who will end up visiting an ND are going to have already been diagnosed. They're probably on either a proton pump inhibitor or, you know, some other kind of medicine, and they either want to get off of it because of side effects or because of some of the long-term consequences, or, you know, it doesn't work for them. And so at that point, going to the MD, who would work with the MD, and communicate back and forth as to why, we would recommend this or that, to look at, okay, well, what are the dietary potential contributing factors to why a person has chronic gastritis, or irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel syndrome. So dealing with the kind of either emergent or the acute, it's often best to go either to the conventional or allopathic doctor or to the emergency room. But really, if there are either lifestyle or nutritional or exercise components or stress components, that's really where naturopathic medicine shines, in helping people understand and then empowering patients to make those changes in their own lives that give them control of their own health.
I'm going to switch a little bit. I'm going to ask you to go back in time a bit. I'm going to share another screen with you. So can you see that one?
Yep.
So when I met you, I think I told you, on the TCAA board, which was a good 10, 12 years ago, I thought you were a dead ringer for Dustin Hoffman. And I still do.
Right.
But when I see this photo, I kind of see the graduate, So how old were you in this picture? Maybe 30, 35 or something like that?
No, I think I would have been either 50-ish or just on the other side of 50, because I'm 63 now. And
Okay.
so, 10, 15 years ago.
I'm 67.
You and my mother. My mother still says, did anyone ever tell you look like Dustin Hoffman?
Oh, your mother really said that?
Oh, my mother says that all the time.
Oh, good. Well, I'd like to meet your mother because is she still living?
Right. So if I could, one thing, make sure that you ask me about how did you become president of Southwest College, because my mother is part of that story. And my mother is still alive. She's 90 years old.
Wow.
She's in really good health. She is, quarantined like everyone else, but she plays bridge online. She took a drawing class online.
Wow.
She's very, very active and, has been influential in my life.
Sounds like
my father.
Sounds like she could have been a character on Seinfeld. But anyway,
yeah.
I want to ask you a question. How did you become president of SCNM?
So I was a faculty member at the college, and it was in the late 90s, so 21 years ago. And the school was a young school. It opened in 93 and really pushed the boundaries in a lot of ways, but probably a little bit too far and kind of got frayed at the edges. And so in other words, that's like a euphemistic way of saying the school was like pretty bankrupt at the time. Broke, closed, not good, facing a very uphill battle. And
where was its location at that time? Was it same location?
It had moved. Yeah, it had moved because it started in Scottsdale in an old elementary school in Osborne. Moved to the Tempe campus in 1996, and the school just didn't have. And you serve on the board, so you know how carefully we pay attention to the school's finances and making sure that we have enough financial reserves. And so to buy this campus at the time, even though it was only one building, was probably a little bit too early. But at any rate, things went from bad to worse. There was kind of they removed the founding president, and people came in who were not particularly well qualified. And so I don't know, things didn't go well. And when they closed the school, the board actually voted to close the school. And a colleague and actually I should say he stood up first at an all school meeting and said, no. And so he and I worked with what was left of the board, because half the board resigned, and we just took it one day at a time to kind of claw our way back. And this was in the summer. And so we reopened that fall. We paid all of our, whatever we had to pay in terms of payroll. We had to post a letter of credit to the Department of Education. The banks, I had to go to the workout division, at Wells Fargo for 2 years. I didn't even know what a workout division was. But at any rate, we were both faculty members. And I became the interim president at the time, just, kind of like one day at a time. And I had this conversation with my mother, which I think is, from a leadership standpoint, was really important for me and hopefully for some of the people who are watching this. I don't know if it was like false humility or real humility. I said, things are on an even keel. This was a few months later. I'm really, we've pulled together. I'm proud of what we've done. And, they're going to do a search for a not permanent ever, but, not an interim president, but a president. And I guess they'll find, whoever's out there, like there's like presidents, they grow on trees or, wherever you find them, because I'd come from the faculty. And so I didn't really have a background in it. And I thought that was a nice thing to say. My mother, she like lit into me for maybe 15 minutes. And the upshot of it in like a sentence or two was that you either do this job like you mean to keep it, or you don't deserve to be the president, even as the interim president. So you decide what you're, who you are. And but it was like, it was a lot longer than that, or it felt a lot longer, with a lot of haranguing and yelling at me and things like that.
That sounds like one of those aha moments. It's like, wow, this is kind of a life-changing moment to hear this.
Yeah, and it really did, and it brought out, a couple of things that I think about is that, oftentimes it's the circumstances, that, we talk about, are leaders born, or are they shaped, or, or how do they develop? And obviously, you have to have something inside you, in terms of how to deal with like, challenges or stress, because not everybody wants to deal with that. And, how you're brought up a certain way. And I think for me, it was, the way my parents brought me up. My father and mother always served on boards. And so, part of that was inculcated in me. But the other thing that I think, and again, in this time of the pandemic, is that history shapes leaders, and that we have opportunities to, the opportunity for us to do something exceptional, extraordinary, or great, is because of the circumstances that we're in. I mean, look at like American history, like the most revered presidents, are the ones who, face the most daunting challenges, Lincoln, for example. And so for us in this time of the pandemic, we have an opportunity to write our own history, like our own, not like a chapter in the world's pandemic history, but in the history, in our case, as a trustee and as president of SCNM, we're writing the history of this school that will be a chapter, in the school's history, the pandemic of 2020 and 21, hopefully not more than that. But how did we respond to that? And how did we come apart at the seams? Did we just squeak through, or did we find a way to, to seek opportunities and perhaps, make it through and thrive?
Let me stop you there and ask, because people that are watching and don't know a lot about the school, could you tell us, before pandemic, if we went back to, December of 2019, which seems like a long time ago, what was sort of the day-to-day world for you? I mean, tell us a little bit about the school and your students and the mix of students. Take a couple of minutes to do that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, well, a year ago, SCNM was a single-purpose institution. We'd had the Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine program since the school's inception, and had been working on developing a new program for the previous 2 years. And we just gotten approval for that. And so we were in December of 2019, we were really working on launching this nutrition program. So the school was kind of in a very different place. You know, it was a single purpose as opposed to, you know, two programs. Um, and what happened come April was when we launched the nutrition program, which was 100% online, we were able to take all of that investment in online learning and apply it to the ND program, because that's how we made the pivot from a 100% on ground program to something that has been, you know, largely a virtual program, you know, since then. You know, the people sometimes, not many times, ask me, what does a college president do? And you have, you're like either the link between a lot of different communities, uh, or you could see it sort of as a juggler with a bunch of balls up in the air. And each of these are kind of groups of relationships that you have to maintain. So the board is one of them. And Lou, you know, we had an accreditation visit just this past week, and they couldn't get over our board. I mean, and this was like something that they said,
Over it, meaning they were impressed by it?
they said, and this goes back to the previous accreditation visit, so 2 in a row, they said, you know, most schools, colleges would kill for a board like yours. And so having that relationship with the board and helping, not like it's like, I'm not the reason that we have a great board, but as a president, I appreciate the importance of having a great board. And so that means that there's a lot of resources that, you know, that the board, you know, avails itself of to become, you know, to become a high performing board. Then you have students, you have staff, you have faculty, there's the legislature, there's the Public Health Association, there's other associations. And so like my job, at least as I see it, is kind of like the connector between, you know, our institution, what goes on here, and as many of these relationships that I've developed over the years, to be able to reach out and either shoot an email, pick up the phone, or text, you know, someone in the legislature or in this environment. You know, I can't tell you how many times we've reached out and had phone calls with either directors of public health, or the recently retired director, or the former director of the Department of Health Services for the state or the county. And so that, you know, those were the same things that were going on, you know, whether it was one program or two. But I don't know. For me, I've always felt like it was an enjoyable way to spend my time.
You know, I've been on the board now long enough to attend probably half a dozen graduation ceremonies when they were in person. And one thing that really amazed and impressed me is that the large percentage of female students as opposed to male. Why is that, do you think?
Well, first of all, as two guys on this interview, women graduate from undergraduate at a higher rate than men do, number one. And women outnumber men in almost every graduate program, except maybe engineering. Like there's, for the most part, you know, that's true in higher ed. Beyond that, I think that naturopathic medicine, similar to nursing, is a very nurturing profession, one that requires high emotional intelligence, and also a degree of selflessness that, you know, that I think, you know, are characteristics, you know, and hopefully I'm saying this the right way, but I think are more characteristic of women uh, than men.
Do you try to recruit men at all, or does it, I mean, is there any kind of,
No,
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 just
we
take them as they come?
I'm
Okay.
kidding. No, I'm kidding. No, actually, you know, we are very intentional about the many ways that we recruit students into both the ND program and in the Master of Science in Clinical Nutrition. I didn't really talk about that, but our new program is a master's degree in nutrition, which is very cool. It's 100% online. Um, but so we seek to have a diverse student body and also workforce, but from a student body standpoint, so we go to certain college fairs. We visit historic Black colleges and universities so that we could increase the diversity from that perspective. And so the admissions department is actually very intentional about that. And we do for men. And again, this may sound kind of stereotypical, or maybe I'm stereotyping, but for example, at the Neil Reardon Center for Regenerative Medicine, um, anything to do with sports medicine, has a little bit more appeal, historically at least, to men. So I think men still outnumber women in chiropractic school. And so anything to do with physical medicine. And so, so that would be something that, if we're communicating with male students and they express an interest in that, that may be, something that we would emphasize. On the other hand, I had a treatment at the center. I had prolotherapy in my left shoulder just last week, and the woman who was the student was from Calgary, and she chose SCNM specifically because of the Neil Reardon Center. And the resident who did the injections into my shoulder also happened to be a woman. So, it obviously, has an appeal even in those areas that I was sort of lumping together as maybe more, more male oriented.
Just take a second and tell us, what is the Neil Rudin Center?
We have on our campus, we have, it's an 8.5 acre campus. We have 3 buildings, and there's a 48,000 square foot building, the community commons, on our campus, and it houses, among other things, the Neil Reardon Center for Regenerative Medicine. And so this is a clinic that offers patients non-opioid approaches to pain, which is actually pretty foresightful since we designed it. We first conceived of it in 2013, before the opioid, epidemic, really became apparent. But it was apparent to us that yep, that's the building and that's the signage. So that's looking from Broadway.
I was going to say,
And
are you seeing that? I just pulled it up.
yeah,
Okay.
so what we did was we said, we have all these tools here. What if we brought an anesthesiologist pain interventionist, so someone with a background in pain from the conventional side. So we have Dr. Clee Bethel, who's an anesthesiologist. We have acupuncture. We have Dr. Deng, who is one of the best acupuncturists in North America. We have naturopathic physicians. We have all these tools. We could use drugs when necessary. We have acupuncture. We have chiropractic or manipulation. We use nutrition. So eating in an anti-inflammatory manner as opposed to a pro-inflammatory manner, helps decrease pain. We have herbs that can be used, like curcumin is an herb, cannabis sativa, CBD is an example of something that helps modulate pain. And then we have these regenerative therapies. So prolotherapy is an injection, platelet-rich plasma, another type of injection, and then stem cell therapy is the third in that group of regenerative therapies. Prolotherapy is kind of the cheapest and the easiest. It's just lidocaine with some B vitamins and a little bit of glucosamine or some sugar in it. Glucosamine. You inject it either into a joint or around damaged ligaments. For example, in my case, it was a ligament in my collarbone and shoulder blade. And it stimulates a reaction by the body it stimulates the healing reaction. Platelet-rich plasma, extracts blood. You spin off the red and the white cells. You're left with serum and platelets, and they have growth factors and anti-inflammatory constituents. And then stem cells come from either the patient's hip, so I've had it drawn from there, so it's actually a bone marrow aspiration, or a yep, and that is our team at the Neil Reardon Center. Stem cells you can also get from cord blood, so from the umbilical cord, or from you can get amniotic tissue, and people mistake stem cell, this kind of regenerative therapy, with the idea that you can create like a new ear or a new organ with stem cells. So those are embryonic stem cells. Those are what are called pluripotent. They could turn into anything. But what we're talking about are they are not embryonic or fetal, which cannot be used in the United States and is not used here or should not be used anywhere else. But they come from either the cord blood or from the patient, him or herself. And those are, it's kind of like the conductor of a symphony. You inject stem cells, usually millions, into the site of the injury, and they attract all kinds of healing molecules. So fibroblasts, chondroblasts, to help heal the cartilage. They bring growth, they elaborate growth factors and stimulate growth and regeneration on the site. And so when researchers actually tagged the stem cells with isotopes and then looked back over periods of months, you would see new cartilage, let's say in the knee, but the isotopes weren't there. So it wasn't like the stem cells became part of the patient's knee. They sort of did their job, and then the body gets rid of them. So yeah, so that's the Neil Reardon Center. And there's 110 million people in the United States who suffer from chronic pain. And so, really the answer, and really even in the most conventional medical publications, opioids is a third tier treatment for chronic pain. First tier is acupuncture, yoga, Tai Chi. I mean, it's bizarre. Second tier is some of these treatments plus NSAIDs, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories. And opioids should only be reserved for the most, either resistant cases or cases where you've tried these other things first. And so, we have something that really offers patients, real solutions and, really personalized care.
We're moving towards the end, Paul, just because we could take all day, but I know we can't take all day. So I'm going to ask you a couple of kind of standard questions for a leader, but I'd like to know what you consider your one failure in life to be.
Ooh.
I caught you on that one, I know.
Wow. Yeah. My one failure in life. Well,
that you're willing to reveal, I suppose, would be the way to say that.
Well, I would say in terms of failures, I would say I fall short on almost a daily basis. In other words, I screw something up all the time. And
you're not trying to tell us you're human, are you?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, that I screw up and that I'm okay with it. And so I don't beat myself up, over and over again. I would say, I'm a really, and I'm sort of beating around the bush here because I used to think that I'm a really, I was like the luckiest person that I knew. I have like a wonderful wife who, I've been with, this is our 35th year, 2 kids. They're both married. They have jobs. They live they live nearby. They're doing well. And our son happens to be an ND and married a classmate, and they're both doing well. Our daughter and son-in-law are in aerospace, and so we're just really fortunate that way. I have a job that I like, and I read this book by Tom's of Maine. You remember, the toothpaste, Tom's of Maine, or
Yeah.
Tom Chappell wrote this book called Managing Upside Down. And it was about managing from a place of goodness, as opposed to, it was written about 15 years ago about, all these management theories, but it really starts with being a good person and and finding a way to infuse that into your organization. Uh, and and it was like, after reading that book, I always knew I was a good person. Um, or what, like, my mother or father would call a mensch. You try to do, um, you try to do good. Uh, and that once I accepted that, I didn't feel like I was uh, lucky. I was just like, this is maybe a way that the world works. And so I would say I screwed up. If I were to say, if there was a mistake that I made, it was operating out of fear uh, on a few occasions. And I think back to some personnel decisions here at the school where I was just afraid to do something. We had a research director many years ago who was fantastic, and the person who she reported to, who reported to me, refused to sign off on a major NIH grant, and uh, and and it was like, you know, as from an organizational standpoint, if he says no, I didn't want to go over his head or force him to sign off on this, even though I knew it was the right thing, and I didn't, and she left, and I've regretted. I mean, so that's like, it's not like every day I think about that, but every day, if I have to think about
Well,
a
I'm kind of
mistake not to make,
I forced you to think about it. So I
right? If I think about, like, um, not to be heedless and oblivious to consequences, but or like to be fearless, and risky, but you know if you know something is right, standing up and facing the consequences is the right thing to do. And so, those are the kind of failures. And I would say I could probably come up with like 3 or 4 of those
well,
where,
we'll do that.
I definitely
We'll
fell
do that
short.
in our next session. Um,
Mhm.
so I was going to ask the other side of that question, but I almost feel like you answered it, which was, what's one great success? And I think you just told us is that you realize that you have to operate, you can't operate out of fear, and you have to be
Right.
genuine, and you have to do good. It seems like that's almost your greatest success at the same time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I think during this pandemic, uh, you know, back in March, when everything kind of shut down and we, converted from, and you were in the board meetings, we were looking at, like, how big a loss are we going to sustain?
mm,
And as a not-for-profit, dealing with the Department of Higher Ed, a significant loss would put us into a very bad place as far as the Department of Ed is concerned. Um, and it got to the point where I said, I remember saying to people here at the school, and maybe to some degree with the board, that someday we will look back on how we did during this time, and we're going to make the decision to succeed. We're going to make the decision to not lay anybody off. We're not going to furlough people. We're not going to cut people's salaries. We're going to figure out a way to come out of this hole. And that, I think, came out of that, I'm not going to operate from a position of fear. And obviously there were a lot of factors that came together there. And I would say, at least for today, my biggest success is that this is like the best time in SCNM's history, bizarrely enough, in terms of, I talked about our board, our faculty. You've interacted with our academic leadership and other leadership at the school. Probably the biggest success is putting together a team of people who are, from top to bottom, extraordinary.
All right. So last question is, if I want to know what's on your bucket list. One item that's on your bucket list that we can close the interview with.
On the bucket list, I want to see Mount Everest. I don't want to climb Mount Everest, but I was thinking, they have these treks in Nepal, I think, where you can go either to the base camp or something like that at Mount Everest and see it. I used to do mountaineering and ice climbing and rock climbing, and like the thought of, back in the 70s, like very few people could climb in the Himalayas. And so that was always, amazing to me. So either a trek in Nepal, or maybe to ride my bicycle in Tibet. You could ride to within, where you could see Mount Everest. And apparently it's quite beautiful.
On your first bucket list item, does that involve ice climbing and rope climbing, or is that just?
No, for me, no, that would be either walking,
Yeah,
riding my bike, no ice climbing. I actually developed like a kind of a fear of heights, which is a weird thing.
that too. Well,
Yeah.
You know what? I'd love to join you. So when you start planning your trip, check in with me.
Good.
I'd love to do
Okay.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I'm getting
I'm gonna
old.
hold
My bucket list is just, the windows start to decrease on you. And, there's reaches a point as you age that that today I can do almost anything, but can I tomorrow? Can I in a year? You start to think about that. So,
yeah.
Listen, I 100% appreciate your time today. I value your friendship a ton. And I think you really, I love the insights I've gotten from you today. Every interview I do, I write down, 4 or 5 things that are really important to leadership. Being genuine, don't operate out of fear, just have an extraordinary team around you, I think is very important, and do good. So let's go out and do good.
And listen to your mother.
Yeah, so my mother passed away many years ago, but I still listen to her though. So
yeah, and my father passed away. It's becoming many years ago. But those were the people who shaped.
You know what? I think
that I do pretty much came out of them.
I think our parents would have liked each other, and my guess is they probably would have been pretty similar to each other too. So
yeah,
good Jewish parents. So all right, Paul, thanks again, and I'll see you soon.
Yep, you bet.
We'll conclude another episode of Tie-Dye Dialogue.